Hello and welcome back to Hudson Auto Films. Today we are continuing on the 4x4 supercar. If you haven't seen the previous episodes, we are embarking on combining a 1994 Land Rover Discovery and a 2007 Aston Martin Vantage. So far we have chopped the body off the Land Rover, put the Aston body onto the Land Rover, removed the floor of the Aston, allowing it to sit lower on the Land Rover chassis, and basically chopped a lot of things so the Aston body can sit right. Today is a very exciting episode, as the last couple of episodes we've been doing important things, however they're not particularly visually stimulating things. Well, today that will change. Today we have lots of exciting parts arriving, including a front bumper, much bigger wheels, and maybe even a bonnet. So let's get moving. We're going to start with the front bumper today, so let me show that to you and show you what we're going to have to do to get it to fit right. So as you can see, if I take you round here, I'd really hope that we could retain this portion of the Land Rover bumper, but basically it is just hitting there, and then obviously when it gets closer it's going to hit all there as well. Yes, I could take some out of the Aston bumper itself, but really to take the amount out I need, I'd be, wrecking all of the lines of it, which would be a shame. And you'd also end up with the Land Rover bumper basically kind of coming out the front of the Aston body, which wouldn't be great. This side looks a bit more lined up, basically because I lined that one up first, which clearly now you can see all of the problemed area gets shifted over to this side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the Aston bumper off, and then I'm going to basically remove the rest of the Land Rover bumper. So let's do that. So the bumper is on, and it's kind of amazing how a single part can really transform a car. At least to me, it just looks so much more exciting now. All of a sudden it looks more real rather than just kind of two wings kind of loosely sitting on a Land Rover. Obviously the Aston bumper starts to really complete the shape of the Aston grille. Then the final part is the bonnet, so maybe we'll get a bit of that later. As I mentioned at the beginning of this video, the last couple of videos haven't been particularly visually stimulating. Though they have been really important things to do, obviously it's kind of cutting, finessing where the body's sitting. Vitally important, however, not that exciting. But as I said, today's episode, that is going to change. Starting with the bumper, but it just gets better. The big question that has remained throughout this build from myself and you guys has been a combination of wheelbase. Can we make the wheelbase look right, as the Land Rover is 2.5 inches shorter than the Aston wheelbase? And also ride height. The suspension gap is massive. But now we're going to try and change that. These wheels look quite large on a Land Rover, however on this, not so much. And especially when I take you around to this angle, the wheels literally look like those tiny wheels you put on your car when you've got a puncture. This really doesn't look very mean, but maybe that could help. Well, that is a little bit more like it. These are 35-inch wheels, or 315s, and they are pretty mean. I've been on the hunt for the last few weeks to try and find some used wheels that are in good condition and not going to break the bank. One thing which I'd never really explored was 4x4 wheels at this size. They are insanely expensive. Though I've had a lot of Land Rovers, they've always had kind of larger than normal wheels, but not to this extent. One thing which is kind of baffling is these wheels were £450, which I know for kind of overall wheels isn't very expensive, but when you think that I paid less than that for the whole Land Rover Discovery, less than that for the Aston body, this is where builds get really funny. But enough waffling, I know you guys want to see these on, and I do too. What we're going to do first is quickly give them a wipe down as they're a bit dirty, as they have been recently off-roaded by the previous owner. Then we are going to whip them on. But I think the reciprocating saw is going to be quite an essential part of getting these wheels on. So, let's go. All of this water has been in the sill. I knew there would have been a water build-up in there, as it often happens, but I'm not sure if this is a flood car or whether it's just from sitting in the junkyard for 15 years, you know, open top in the rain, but geez, this is crazy. I cut a bunch out. Obviously the car is still in the air jack-wise, but we still need to get quite a lot more out. So I think I'm just going to do a bit more of a square cut across here and there, but it's looking cool. Well, this is a sight to behold. I've managed to clear the wheel. It still needs a lot of tidying up, but as you can see, we've got a decent amount of clearance. You know, not this type of clearance that you want to take a car off-roading, but it fits. As you can see, I had to take out about that much. Lots of tiny, small little incisions as the metal is so thick, even for the reciprocating saw, and obviously that big chunk. But yeah, what a difference. I mean, it actually is crazy how tiny the front wheels look now. I'm going to clearance the wheel better off camera, as I know you are all just as tired of me cutting as I am. But this is really interesting. It kind of doesn't show as well on camera as it does in real life, but the wheel arch issue ceases to be as much of a problem. Of course, yes, the wheel arch does come down too early, but if you look at the spacing of the back of the wheel and the rear of the arch, to me that's quite good. So if we actually just widen the arch like that, so we have a new centre, I think it could look really good. I'm not positive yet. We still might, you know, get fancy moving things. And obviously right now, the other side still has the smaller wheel, so everything's a bit disproportionate and the front wheel's still on and all that sort of thing. But yeah, you can kind of start to gauge it all a little bit more. Okay, so now it is time to get cracking on the other back wheel. But before we do that, I want to take 1 minute out and talk about today's sponsor. Please do stick around, as this is a really good one. Today's episode is brought to you by the good people at Holy. If you're anything like me, you're either spending long days tinkering in the workshop or you're always on the go. I don't know about you guys, but I often try and sustain myself with lots of tea, coffee, and the occasional energy drink. The trouble with that is you have these massive peaks of energy and then you crash, when what you really want is that consistent feeling of energy throughout the day. That is where Holy comes in. I've been using Holy for the last couple of weeks, and I have to say I feel better than I have in a long time. I've got more energy, I feel more hydrated, and I'm able to do a lot more with my days. The great thing about Holy is it's the first real healthy alternative to energy drinks. It gives you a much more better and consistent level of energy while not having any sugar, taurine, and none of the usual junk we find in that sort of thing. Holy is super easy to prepare. You just pick your chosen flavour, mix it with water, shake it up in the shaker, and you're away. My personal favourite is pomegranate piranha, but they all taste brilliant. For your first order, I'd recommend going for a starter kit. It gives you all the gear you need and a selection of Holy's best-selling flavours across their hydration, energy, and iced tea range. To make that even better, you can use the code HAF5 for £5 off your first order, or the code HAF for 10% off any bigger orders or any order post your first order. Please do check them out. I really do recommend this product. I'm genuinely using it, I genuinely like it, and I want you guys to try it. So let me know what you think, and thank you to Holy for making this episode possible. So there we go. This side is a little bit less satisfying as we are missing our rear quarter, which is a story for another day. But yeah, I've cut it out to the point that we clear fine. Just like the other side, you wouldn't want to go off-roading, but it is fine for now. And off camera, I'll kind of clearance everything and make each side even. But yeah, so we now have a complete rear end. But it is time to focus on the front. And even though I think we're going to have to do a fair bit of cutting, it is fiberglass, so that makes our life a lot easier. So let's jack this thing up and see how this goes. This thing is absolutely ridiculous. What a difference a set of wheels can make. As I said, I've just cut the absolute bare minimum off the front bumper due to the placement of the body. But that kind of brings me on to the question which has been on all of our minds, is body placement. Now these big wheels are on, oop, almost fell over. To me, the car looks really, really good. And the slightly shorter Land Rover wheelbase is a lot less visually disrupting. If I take you to the back, as the front wheel is fairly centered with the Aston Arch, this is where the main problem was. And if you cast your mind back to earlier in the video, it really did look dodgy. But due to the size of these wheels, we obviously fill out the back of the arch so much. Yes, the center of the wheel is not the center of the arch. However, we have options. We obviously could just extend the arch like that and bring it down, so creating a new center. Or even just do something that kind of makes it no longer a completely rounded arch. We could kind of cut just down there, something like that. There's lots of options, but it really doesn't look too bad at all to me, especially when you look at it in the grand scheme of the whole car. If I take you to the front, you can see we are basically pretty well centered. We have a little room at the back, which we could go back. Obviously, all of this is very subjective because, yes, we could go back an inch and then we'd have to cut more here to allow for any suspension travel. Definitely going to have to do a lot more cutting at the front. As you can see, I just rounded it off. You can kind of just see, sorry, it's quite reflective, this amazing bodywork. But yeah, so we could move it back a little bit to close the rear gap and make it a bit more centered. But then the other thing we have to think about is if we pull it forward to make this a bit more centered and make that a bit closer, we then gain even more of the chassis coming out the back. I don't know if it's the same on camera really, but it's not actually that horrible to look at. Once this is tidied up, painted black, we can easily integrate it better with the Aston bumper with some sheet metal, but also you can kind of imagine a winch on there, especially with the recess for the number plate. We obviously relocate the number plate, but a winch will look quite good there. It'd tie everything together. Someone did mention putting a spare wheel there, which is also an option, but I don't know. Maybe that would look too kind of large on the back. But yeah, I'd love to know your thoughts about how it's all sitting. To me, it feels really quite good, but I'd love to know what you guys think. Another great thing is the width of these wheels really fills out the Aston arches, which are so terribly wide. They actually poke a little bit. But before our wheels were sitting so deep in, but now they really do look just quite made for it, you could say. But yeah, what a mega machine. But I believe I did promise one last thing at the beginning of this video, and that is a bonnet. So here is our new old bonnet. As you can see, it is actually off a racing car, and unfortunately it has sustained a little bit of racing damage, but that is all good. I'm sure some of you guys can tell me a bit more about the history of the car itself. I'll insert a picture of at least the team that the car was on. I got this from my friend Ben, who was going to convert this into, I believe, a V12 Vantage bonnet with the vents and everything like that, but decided against it. And it's silly really, but I feel a little bit guilty peeling this wrap off, even though it's not, you know, a #1 podium winning car or anything like that, at least that I'm aware of. But I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to try my best to peel off the GT4 Challenge sticker in the middle, put it on a piece of card, frame it, a little bit of a sentimental reminder of, you know, the process of this build. But I know what you want to see. You want to see it on, and you want to see how badly this engine is sticking out. Pretty badly. This thing looks absolutely insane. But as you can see, there is clearly an obstruction. So I'm going to try and take you underneath and show you what's going on. It is almost all radiator. The radiator surround, the radiator itself are all getting in the way. If you kind of look in that small gap, you will see the engine itself actually has quite a good amount of clearance. Of course, when we remove the issue in the front with the radiator, the bonnet will come down and the engine will be closer. But I think overall, actually, we are going to clear. It is all radiator related. But if I take you into the arch, you might be able to see through this mess. That is the fan just kind of curving over there. That is also very much in the way, not just the fan surround, but also the fan itself. So our issues are the radiator surround, and the fan and its shroud. Even though this is annoying, it's to be expected, and it's actually kind of good news when you consider how much this Aston body has been lowered onto such a ridiculously different chassis. The fact that there aren't even more clearance issues is baffling. But how do we resolve this? Well, obviously we're going to have to remove all of those parts I just mentioned. We can then reinstall the radiator, but on an angle. So basically we just have to make a bracket that holds it at that angle. We obviously have a lot of room at the front to do that, so the radiator could very much sit like that. Our other option is to get a new radiator that is maybe wider and lower profile, but I don't think that's really necessary. Also, obviously, this is designed for a Land Rover. It has all of the ports that are needed for a Land Rover, and it just makes life easier. In terms of the fan, I think we're going to have to just remove the fan altogether and resort to electric fans. There's not a huge amount we can do. Of course, we could trim the fan blades, but then they're just not going to be very effective. So we might as well remove it and have an electric fan setup, which is obviously going to be overall more efficient anyway. But you guys will see that charade in the next episode. But for today, I think that just about wraps us up. I hope you are as excited about the progress as I am. It really feels like one of those moments where the build suddenly really starts to come together. I know it's very uncomplex putting wheels on and kind of getting them to fit right, but it really is a make or break moment on the kind of concept. Beforehand, the car looked ridiculous, but we could blame it on the wheels and the suspension and all that sort of thing. But now that is remedied and it actually looks cool. Last thing, my plan was to lower the suspension, but now I'm not so sure. I think it looks kind of cool, but I'd love to know what you guys think. Next week, I'll be back messing around with the radiator, as I mentioned, getting the body in its final position and starting to put the dashboard back in, and then we can get this thing properly mounted. Got lots of metal to make brackets, so that is going to be fun. If you have enjoyed this episode, or even if you haven't, please like, share and subscribe. It really does help me out. It makes the algorithm happy and puts these videos in front of more people, which means more episodes and more of this. If you'd like to support the channel further, please do check out my Patreon. It's linked below. Over there, I share bonus content and behind the scenes stuff, as well as early access to the state of the build. The patrons have seen this in its new monster form for a few days now, so it is cool if you want to get that early scoop. But regardless, I'm just grateful that you're here and I really appreciate your continued support and viewership. It really is amazing that so many of you are enjoying some random bloke building some random thing in a random shed in the middle of nowhere. But yeah, that sums it up really. But yes, thank you so much for watching. Take care and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.